Exciting news. The New Mexico Secretary of State's office has agreed with our position that the town needs to hold an election to change the form of government to the commission manager model this August of 2020. This is exciting news because finally a state official is willing to stand for the rights of the people and to give us a choice, the most important choice of all, to elect the people who are going to be our chosen representatives here in the town of Edgewood. What do you think about that, Jerry?
Well, I think this is one of many examples of how far the town governing body, and especially the triumvirate, which is Mayor Bassett, Councilor Hawley, and Councilor Abrams, will go, bending the law, breaking the law, acting outside the law, in order to accomplish their hidden agenda, and maybe not so hidden agenda, which part of which is staying in office until 2021. That infuriated the town when they extended their terms through the Local Election Act, when they could have reduced them a couple of months and still synced up to the November elections. So now they have once again acted outside the law. We said it in no uncertain terms, calling in the August, the meeting on April 9th. And now the Secretary of State has agreed with us.
And this news is hot off the press, as I understand it.
Yeah, we just got the letter Friday evening, as a matter of fact, May 1st. It was addressed to Mayor Bassett and the entire governing body. We had complained to the Secretary of State about how we clearly saw that a special election was required. And just one excerpt from her letter says, regardless of the source of the requested change in the form of governing body, which is what we're requesting, a special election must be held in July or August of 2020. Those aren't wiggle words. There's no room there. So we informed the town of this, as we have done many times when they're operating outside the law. They refused to do the right thing at that last meeting, and now the Secretary of State has come out in no uncertain terms. This happened once before. We have Karen Kaiser, one of our other core members, on with us today. This happened once before when they were violating the Open Meetings Act. And Karen, you sent a letter to the Attorney General.
Yes, I did, Jerry. Hi, Adrian. It didn't happen as quickly as this one. I sent 3 complaints back in March of 2019, but we got a very strong decision from the Attorney General in February 2020 that told the town in no uncertain terms to change their procedures to comply with the law.
Yeah, and the Open Meetings Act, is very important because it's a way of holding the governing body accountable and getting public input to make the best decisions. The statute around the special election is also another way. These statutes were designed for the people to have input into their own government, and a way of holding their leaders accountable. They can be put up for election if you don't like what they're doing. We attempted to do that in August. They didn't want it. They wanted to postpone it as long as they possibly could in an effort to stay in office through their elected or their unelected term till 2021 without having an election. So we couldn't have voter input, but this is going to change that.
And just to remind folks, we were supposed to have an election in March of this year if the town had not opted into the Local Election Act and thereby extending their terms of office for almost 2 years, like you say.
And they have defended themselves by saying, well, it was allowed under the Local Election Act. Well, it was also allowed, they could extend or shorten their term. They could shorten it by about 60 days, and they still would have synced up. Instead of the March, they would have backed it up into November of 2019, which would have preserved our democratic rights and accountability to the voters. But instead, they decided to extend it for more than 1.5 years. So they would have been in office almost 6 years by doing this. You know, it's kind of an outrageous concept even, but they had the choice, shorten 2 months, go out 18 months or more, and they chose to go that direction. And they have been doing everything in their power, including trying to avoid this special election, which is required by law, in order to stay in office.
And just to remind folks, the purpose of this petition to change the form of government was to restore this voting right to the people, as well as to provide additional protections that we don't currently have, including recall, referendum, and voter initiative to put laws on the books or take laws off the books, as it were. And another key difference is that the people who are elected to represent us could now fully be able to do so, having the ability to put items on the agenda. As it is now, where the mayor controls the agenda, it's essentially like the legislative process that you see in Santa Fe or in Washington, D.C. If they don't want something to make it to the floor, they just send it to committee and kill it. And in this instance, the mayor is the sole committee, and he makes all those decisions.
Right, so you got the power concentrated in the mayor, who's running the agenda, won't let anybody speak unless he says so, won't let debate go on unless he says so, sets up the agenda so that it's the way he prefers and the items that he wants on there. It's a very controlled environment, and it's not normally abused this much, but it has been here, as we've seen, and it's allowed this runaway train. We use that logo for core of the train going off the tracks, because it really has. We're going to change that logo when the town government changes and gets back on track. But for now, it still represents kind of the direction the town is going in. It's off the rails. They're trying to protect their own personal interests, whether economic, in terms of running utilities to property owned by the mayor or by some of the members, and they're staying in power without having to hold an election and run for office.
And that's one of the reasons we think this letter from the Secretary of State's office is a great victory for us.
At that April 9th meeting, 2 of the counselors tried to reason with the mayor, tried to even reason with the town attorney about the questionable interpretation of the law. They seem to know what the Secretary of State has affirmed, but they were not listened to, Counselors Jaramillo and Abraham.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but that is happening a lot under the current environment. And some of it is that gag order power that the mayor currently has under the new form of government, that under the commissioner manager form, that's more spread out. It's more democratic. It's more egalitarian. So each particular commissioner can speak about what they want to. The other parties don't have to agree, but it should at least be aired and debated. You never know when an idea will catch fire and be a good idea for the town.
Well, it was interesting at that April 9th meeting as well, that it was the town attorney's letter, his opinion of council, that concocted the notion that the town could extend this election until November. And the counselors weren't afforded the opportunity to question him about what his opinion was or how he reached those conclusions.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Councilor Abrams used and abused a rule of Robert's Rules of Order of butting in, trying to shut down debate, and then voting on what he wanted to vote on without even considering the second option, which was the special election in August. He made a motion to adopt it in November instead, which is not legal, and the Secretary of State has said so. But he went out of his way to inject himself and butt into the situation and try to shut down debate, and he did it. He effectively shut down debate, and they only had the opportunity to discuss the November position for this instead of August.
Yeah, and we've talked before how it's a race for the first person to make a motion, and that's the motion that passes.
Yeah, and it should not be that way. In fact, the first cat out of the bag is not always the best. In my opinion, it rarely is. It needs to be aired out, and people need to flesh it out and have time to actually think about it. Thinking on your feet is hard enough without having somebody butting in, trying to shut down debate and hold a vote real quick.
That's right. And it reminds me to remind our audience that we are not necessarily advocating for a particular position. I mean, we think the commission manager form of government would be better in the town of Edgewood given the current conditions. But at the end of the day, that's a choice for the people. And all we want is for the people to have their choice in a timely manner as required by the law.
Yeah, and I again want to say that we're advocating for input and openness in town government. And people have already made an impact by just watching our videos, by sometimes sending emails, coming to council meetings, talking to their neighbors, making other people aware of it, has made a big impact. And that's why we are having the effect we have had so far. And it's not over. So our own policies or what we're advocating for extend to our own organization. Anybody can call us, talk to us, get our ear, come up with an idea. At our public meetings, we've always entertained ideas, even if they're oppositional to what we're currently thinking or talking about, because it helps to refine your thinking. Well, tell me why you feel that way. Tell me why this is a bad idea. That's the way government should really be run, and it hasn't been in this town for quite a while now.
Yeah, we certainly don't believe that we have a monopoly on knowledge. And we're learning as well, just as everybody else is in the town of Edgewood. But I think before we're able to make any good analysis about what's going on and the steps that we should take moving forward, we need to know the facts on the ground. And quite frankly, a lot of those pieces of information have been concealed from us, perhaps unintentionally, perhaps through bureaucratic processes that just make it difficult to find and retrieve information, but it could be intentional as well.
So next, the town will need to hold a meeting, and it could be a special meeting or it could be at the next regular meeting, which I believe is May 15th. And they will need to take this issue up. I would find it hard to believe that they could defy the Secretary of State when she's been so clear about this. But I suppose that is an option for them, in which case we would move to a judicial setting with the Secretary of State's support, I'm sure, because our positions are exactly the same, in order to make this happen. But I'm hoping they'll, at this time, we offered the opportunity last time to do the right thing and follow the statute. I hope this time that they will at this next meeting, and that the election will be set up and we can all begin to talk about whether or not we want that form of government.
Well, it's hard to argue that the Secretary of State of New Mexico doesn't know how to correctly interpret the Local Elections Act. I mean,
Yeah, she is the chief election officer in the state of New Mexico. That's her primary responsibility, is to enforce the election laws or to maintain uniformity in how they're applied.
Well, it'll be hard to ignore this letter. Will this be posted on the Eye on Edgewood website?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we'll post it right below this this podcast so everybody can see it.
It's a good read. I think people will be surprised, because often positions against the mayor are portrayed to be crazy or character assassination or, mean-spirited. And it's like, no, we just want to follow the law and have the rights that we're entitled to.
Good point. These are the fundamental rights that protect us in these instances. And if they don't follow the law, we have no protections. So these are our fundamental rights. We should have them.
And there's nothing more fundamental than voting.
And it respects all the people that took the time to sign those petitions.
Yeah, the people that signed them, the people that talked about them to their neighbors, the people that circulated them. There is a certain amount of respect for the will of the people that's been lacking here. And it creates a lot more difficulty, which may be the point for them, to create difficulty for us to get our rights upheld. But we're determined to do it. We're doing it every day. Want to thank everybody for the participation of signing the petitions, talking to your neighbors, watching the videos. All of it counts. All of it helps. And it really does take all of us to accomplish this kind of change.
No, that's certainly true. And we are excited and grateful to the Secretary of State's office for taking a reasonable approach to the reading of the law, and for listening to the citizens of the state of New Mexico, including the residents of this local community here in Edgewood. Thank you for joining us. This is Adrian Terry, Karen Kaiser, and Jerry Powers, bringing you important information that you need to know on behalf of citizens for an open and responsible Edgewood. Thanks for watching.